And very good. It's going to be like letting the salmon go down the river here. I'm going to release. Ready? 32 people are going to come in. Here they come. Admit all. Bon voyage, everyone. Thanks for doing this. Here we go. It's fun.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Just want to make sure everyone has a chance to get going before we get started. Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Glad to see so many familiar faces, and those of you I don't know, I'm Evan Johnston. I am Chellie's legislative director, and I handle arts policy issues for her down in DC. I'm here alongside my colleague Sarah Lawrence, who handles similarly arts issues up in Maine. So we're glad to be connected with all of you if we haven't met before. We'll make sure you have all our contact information after this workshop. So don't worry about that. Quick rundown of how this is going to go. We are going to be joined by Chellie for a few minutes, so she has a chance to welcome you all. And we'll transition into a presentation by some of our colleagues from National Endowment for the Arts. We're so glad to have them with us. And then finally, there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. So if and when you have questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat box. Sarah will read questions from the chat out to the presenters once we get there. And we can, work through any follow-up at that time. Great. So with that, I will turn things over to Chellie for a few minutes.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Evan and Sarah, for organizing this. And in particular, thank you to our guests from the NEA. We are really pleased that you're willing to take the time to work with everyone in the state of Maine who is anxious to learn more about how they can benefit from these programs. And I especially want to say hello to my good friend, Diane Dewhurst. There she is. She's the senior deputy chair at the NEA, a new position for her. And we're going to miss her. She's been working with us in the House at Speaker Pelosi's office. And I think her political life goes all the way back to George Mitchell and before. So she's intricately tied to Maine, even though she might be in DC, but we're really glad to have her there. And I see David Greenham's on the call, the Maine Arts Commission executive director. So hi. And if I get started saying hi to all of you on the call, I see so many wonderful faces and names. So I'm just pleased to be on the phone with all of you. I wish I was in Maine with all of you because it's just better, and no one should be in Washington in July, period. That's just the way it goes. But here we are. But here we are because we're very busy working on our appropriations bill and have already passed through the interior budget. And as you know, I'm the subcommittee chair. So this year we put a big increase into the NEA and NEH, and we'll be fighting hard to make sure that that stays in the Senate. So you'll have another opportunity to lobby for that good number. But let me just say a couple of things. I think we should get on to the important work of the call as quickly as possible. But I know we've had a few chances to do these kinds of conversations throughout the past year and a half. And I don't have to tell any of you, it's just really been a tough year. It's been a tough year for our venues, for-profit, not for-profit. All of the people who work in the arts have been challenged. And it's just it's just hard to tell how long it will take for everyone to recover and all of our organizations to recover to the vigorous, important part they are, particularly of the main economy and of our culture as well. We need you now more than ever as we are healing and rebuilding our economy and just having you be a part of the important work that we do. So our goal is to help you as much as possible. As everyone says, arts venues were the first to close and the last to open. And I know we're still undergoing challenges in getting everybody open again. I don't want to tell you about all the programs, but there certainly will be an opportunity to see what is still out there from the American Rescue Plan. But I know that many of you were able to take advantage of PPP loans. The Shutter Venues operating grants have been somewhat of a nightmare, but I understand they're starting to get out there. So thank goodness for that. And we just want to be cognizant of what we need to do going into the future and how to make sure our future policy, particularly in the next couple of years, reflects the challenges that you continue to face. So that's important. Like I said, we passed the American Rescue Plan back in March, and that had an extra $135 million for the NEA and limited the amount of match. So we were trying to do all of the things that we can. Today, I think we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the grant opportunities that are still out there. And as I said, some of the programs that we're looking to in the future. I think it goes without saying that we all understand that NEA's grant application process can seem daunting. These are hard things to get through, but that is exactly why we're here today. And I want to just mention a couple of things. Part of the intent of the funding is to make sure we reach a wide variety of organizations, including small community-based groups that may not have received federal funding before. So we want to make sure that everyone in Maine feels that they have just as much access to this funding as big arts institutions in New York and Los Angeles. And I can say, as a side, that is fully the intent in what we do in arts funding. Sometimes the arts funding comes under assault when we're passing an appropriations bill. There'll always be some member or 22 members of Congress who get up and say, I don't understand why this money goes for the arts. That's just frivolous. And we spend a lot of time explaining to our colleagues that every community in this country benefits from arts organizations and humanities organizations. And that can be the tiniest little historical society museum, or it can be the community players, or it can be your own small state symphony. It's a broad cross section of things, but they're critical everywhere. Arts in the schools, arts programs for individual artists, they matter everywhere, and they matter almost more in our small rural states where communities rarely have the ability to pay for these programs through, a town budget or a school budget. And so that's why we want to make sure that everything that we do is really accessible to people around the country. And good for you guys, I like to use Maine as my best example. So we're really proud of all of you who work to go after these grants, whose organizations have been helped by these grants. And honestly, just so you know, it's not just about your organization. You give me the wonderful stories that I'm able to tell my colleagues when I say, I come from the most rural state in the nation, and we're not very high in per capita income, and we have a lot of communities that are really struggling, but here's why these grants benefit us. So we just want to give you all the help that we can to be able to take care of this. So I'm going to go back to work and, just get right on convincing my colleagues that they should do the right thing. I want you to know, just as an aside, I have a little break here, and I'm literally baking blueberry pies for my colleagues because a few of them have promised they would vote for me if they gave them food. Now, they wanted lobster rolls, but that's just a little hard this time of year, shuffling. But I got my Maine frozen blueberries, and I'm pieing them up right now. And Evan's going to help me deliver them tomorrow. So I'm going to make sure everybody on that appropriations committee eats a slice of pie and then feels beholden to me for the next year to make sure we get that money for you. So I guess I better be thanking the Maine farmers too. So anyway, thank you to everybody. I'm going to jump off and get back to work. Although I every part of my work is wonderful, and I'm really glad to be with all of you. And don't ever hesitate if you have lots of follow up after this call. You can connect with Evan, Sarah, me, anyone in our office, and we'll make sure we have good opportunities to work with arts institutions that are there for all of us. So, and thanks again, Diane, and everybody from the NEA for being with us. We really, really appreciate you. So thanks a lot. Everybody get to work now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chellie. All right, so with that, I will turn things over to our NEA colleagues. I think they have a presentation to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Evan, to Congresswoman Pingree. You know, I'm not making any news here when I say that there is no greater champion for the arts and the creative workforce in DC, in Maine, in the country. I know I'm being recorded, so I might get in trouble with other members of Congress, but I feel confident in saying it. And that goes to for her staff, Evan and Sarah and Tyler on her committee staff. Evan was the first meeting I had when I took this job shortly after Inauguration Day, just the most welcoming, the most knowledgeable, and it's just such a privilege working with the Congresswoman's office. So encourage everyone to be in touch. I know Evan will be busy delivering pies tomorrow, so maybe give her a break in the next 24 hours, but be in touch with them. You have truly, again, the greatest champion for the creative workforce Congress has, and I know you all know it, but just wanted to say it one more time. I'm joined today by Diane Dewhurst, who the Congresswoman mentioned, my new boss and our senior deputy chair, and knows the Congresswoman well. So I just want to give Diane space to say a quick word about just how wonderful the Congresswoman is, if I may.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks, Ben. And thank you to Evan and Sarah and all of Congresswoman Pingree's staff. I literally am so excited to be here and to see you all. I am thrilled to be with my new colleagues at the NEA, but I do miss my colleagues on the Hill. Congresswoman Pingree I got the privilege to see her up close for several years, many years actually. And she is a wonderful representation of what American leadership looks like on all fronts. And there is not a conversation that goes by that she does not mention her constituents or how much she loves the state of Maine, even in the winter, not just in July. I did have the opportunity to work for Senator George Mitchell, and I have traveled around Maine in the winter. So I think I earned some stripes doing that. But thank you for your devotion to the arts. Thank you to my NEA colleagues who are going to impart great wisdom as to how to get you the help that you need so that we can get back to a thriving creative community. And Ben, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your efforts in working with Team Pingree to come together. So let's get on with it, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Diane. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Jen Hughes and Courtney Spearman, really the content experts in all of this. Jen Hughes, our Director of Design and Creative Placemaking, and Courtney is the design specialist on that team. And we'll look forward to presenting more information today and getting to your Q&A. And our goal is really not only to give you a deep dive into the upcoming American Rescue Plan funding opportunity that the Congresswoman so eloquently described, but really we want to demystify the National Endowment for the Arts and our application process. We want you to leave this meeting today knowing that an NEA grant is within your reach and that you have the technical assistance tools you need. And that means staying in touch with us. What we're most excited about going forward after today's meeting is a live Q&A session, so that it will look a lot like the Zoom room that we're in today. You'll need to register, and I'll put a link into the chat so everyone can have it. And it'll be a couple of my colleagues, again, in a room that looks a lot like this one. Drop by, very casual, ask your questions, listen in. No question too small. Chances are if you're thinking of it while you're putting together your application, someone is too. So go to one, go to all of them. I know my colleagues will really look forward to seeing you. And that's just a way of our saying that we want you to stay in touch, that there's no question that if you don't ask it today, you'll miss the opportunity. Stay engaged throughout the process, very up until the deadline and beyond when we talk about the other funding opportunities that the NEA has available. And so the presentation will provide an overview of the NEA, the grant programs we offer, and then get into details about the upcoming opportunity made possible with the Congresswoman's leadership and the American Rescue Plan. And we'll make sure we leave time for questions as well. And so if we could just go to the next slide, please. Great, thank you so much. So a little bit on how we got here today. In addition to our regular annual grant programs as part of the American Rescue Plan, the National Endowment for the Arts will distribute $135 million. And of that amount, 40% has been allocated to state and regional arts organizations for regranting through their own programs. And we'll get into this in a little more detail, but we would encourage you to check out the guidelines, not only for the National Endowment for the Arts, but also NEFA, the regional arts organization that serves Maine, as well as the Maine State Arts Agency, and apply broadly. And we'll get into the details again about how you can do that effectively. And funding will be available for general operating support for the American Rescue Plan. And again, we'll talk about exactly what that means. And if you haven't seen our guidelines just yet, they're available on our website, and we'd encourage you to dig in and get to work on your application. As the Congresswoman described, we're really working to make sure this funding reaches a broad constituency, including organizations that serve populations traditionally underserved by government, organizations with small and medium-sized budgets, organizations from rural to urban communities throughout the state of Maine, the country, and of course, the Congresswoman's district, and organizations that may be applying for federal support through the Arts Endowment for the first time. And we know that if you're applying for federal funding for the first time, you're going to need some additional technical assistance resources. I sure would. I've learned so much just in the short time that I've been at the Arts Endowment. So stay in touch, reach out to, we have a list of contacts that we'll provide later in the presentation. Take a look at our website and find the discipline-specific director or specialist in your artistic field. Join one of those live Q&A sessions and just continue to be in touch. And we'll talk more about the specifics of the ARP program and its support for those operating costs that I mentioned. Our regular grant programs provide project support, and we'll walk through the details on our annual programs now and make sure that you're staying engaged with our agency well beyond this upcoming opportunity. And with that, I'll pass it over to my wonderful colleagues, Jen and Courtney.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, particularly because the work that we do at the NEA and sort of the inspiration I personally draw is from what you all are doing across the state. So I couldn't help but sort of profile a couple incredible projects that we've been privileged enough to support through our NEA funding programs. We've had a wide range of grantees and honorees from all across Maine, including Portland Stage Company, the Telling Room, the Camden International Film Festival, Opera Maine, Engine Inc., Creative Portland, as well as incredible literary artists such as Adam Gianelli and Janine Yamamoto, as well as Heritage Fellows Don and Cindy Roy, honored for their renowned traditional Franco-American fiddle and piano music. So pictured here, just wanted to give a shout out to the incredible work of Marty Pottinger of Terremoto, also known as Art at Work. And if you're not familiar with this project, Glacier Stories, I encourage you to check it out. After years of planning, team building, and promotion leading up to Maine's bicentennial, the Art at Work musical theater production, Maine, USA, The History of Maine from the Ice Age till now, had to pivot during the pandemic. But the indomitable project leader, Marty, shifted gears to produce Glacier Stories, which is a series of short videos featuring diverse Mainers sharing their love for the state's rich natural resources through stories, song, and spoken word. So this is a project that was actually supported through the Our Town program, and I'm just such a big fan that if you're not already familiar with it, just encourage you to check it out. I also just want to acknowledge and echo what we heard from Representative Pingree. We have a real deep commitment and support to serving all communities across the country, including and specifically rural and tribal communities. We're really pleased to feature a recent Our Town grantee, the Penobscot Nation, in partnership with the Abbey Museum up in Bar Harbor, Maine. And they're doing incredibly inspiring work that's really sort of setting a new way of approaching and thinking deeply about cultural tourism. So we are funding and supporting cultural tourism planning and arts programming that is celebrating the Penobscot Nation's cultural assets. So this really exciting partnership project will include cultural heritage training for tribal citizens and arts programming designed to give an immersive introduction to Penobscot cultural practices on Sugar Island, Maine. We also want this other program to be on your radar if it's not already, the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. This is a program that is a leadership initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with the Housing Assistance Council. And it's really focused on communities with populations of 50,000 or less. And the Citizens Institute on Rural Design empowers local citizens to use their unique artistic and cultural resources to guide local development and shape the future of their communities. We've had exceptional participation from various communities throughout Maine, including Millinocket, which hosted a workshop right before the pandemic in fall of 2019. And we're really pleased to say that Skowhegan, Maine is participating as a design learning cohort member. And I just lift this up as another way outside of our grant funding opportunities to really connect with the work of the agency, particularly if you are working in rural communities. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit just to talk a bit about brass tacks eligibility. And this is really across the board for all of our funding opportunities for organizations at the agency. So that includes ARP, but we're also just going to give you a little preview of the other programs that we offer on an annual basis, so you can really tap the full extent of what our agency is able to fund and support. But first and foremost, in order to apply, you must meet certain requirements to be eligible for applying to an NEA grant. Nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 organizations, units of state or local government, federally recognized tribal communities or tribes. You must demonstrate a 3-year history of arts programming. So you don't have to be a nonprofit for 3 years, but you have to be able to demonstrate that 3-year history that you've engaged in arts or cultural programming. All of our grants outside of ARP requires a 1-to-1 non-federal cost share match, and we really work with both applicants and our ultimately grantees to make sure that they can meet that match requirement. Certainly in-kind donations are eligible to be utilized as that match, so it doesn't have to all be in cash. But we'll talk a little bit specifically about this ARP one-time opportunity where there is no match requirement, which is why we've kind of highlighted that here on this page. So just to pull back the curtain a little bit, what does the application review look like? So our grant review process includes 3 levels of review. The first level of review is a citizen panel, which is made up of experts in the field, as well as one layperson who is currently not directly working in the arts and culture field. And all of our panels are diverse in terms of geography, gender, ethnicity, and expertise. Next, those panel recommendations are then submitted to our National Council on the Arts for review and approval. That is our presidentially appointed body that oversees the agency. And then from there, the council forwards on recommendations ultimately to the chairman at our agency. I will flag that if you are interested in serving on a peer review panel, we want to welcome you into that process, and we'll give you a link for where you can really sign up to participate in that process if you haven't before. And for those of you who have reviewed NEA grants in the past, we are incredibly grateful for your service. All right, so let's get into some of the funding categories at the NEA. This is just for a quick overview. Partnership agreements are available to the designated state arts agencies and 6 U.S. regional arts organizations. We're so pleased to be joined today with the Maine Arts Commission. Thank you, David, for being here. We also have grants for organizations. That's primarily what we're going to quickly run through. Challenge America, grants for arts projects, Our Town, and research grants. These are recurring opportunities that happen every year. So if you haven't applied in the past, certainly encourage you to check out those opportunities, and we'll do a quick preview for that. We also do grants for individuals, but they are limited to literature fellowships. Though we do offer recognition to jazz artists through NEA's Jazz Masters program and folk and traditional artists through our National Heritage Fellowship program. And we have pretty exceptional representation from Maine National Heritage Fellowship winners. So generally, you can submit one application per year by the applicant organization. However, there are some exceptions to this rule, and we'll sort of touch on that a bit. Okay, I just want to make sure I highlight our state and regional partnerships specifically. We do this through grants to the 50 designated state arts agencies, 6 territories, and 6 regional arts organizations. So if you are not already checking out the opportunities offered by the Maine Arts Commission, certainly encourage you to do that, as well as to check out your regional arts organization, New England Foundation for the Arts, because by law, 40% of NEA grant funds are designated directly to these entities, the states and the regions. All right, so now as we shift back into the specifics about the grants for organizations from the NEA, I mentioned Challenge America. That is one of our 3 primary funding programs for arts organizations. We have grants for arts projects. There are 2 deadlines a year, February and July. One of our deadline just passed for that, as you'll see, as well as the Our Town Creative Placemaking Grant Program. And that is an open opportunity in addition to ARP. So certainly check out that opportunity with the deadline of August 5th. And Courtney and I specifically oversee that program, so we're happy to dive into any deeper questions related to that. So as a little bit of an overview, Challenge America is a program that supports small organizations to extend the reach of the arts to populations that are underserved. And so all grantees must address how their organization or audience has been underserved. This is defined by our legislation and agency policy and refers to those whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by geography, ethnicity, economics, or disability. These are straight $10,000 grants and require a 1-to-1 cost share match. Again, that cost share match must have a non-federal source, but could be an in-kind match. So this is really an abbreviated application and robust technical assistance in working with our specialists who oversee this program to really get you ready to apply. And just keep in mind the deadline is typically in April each year. Engine Inc. in Biddeford, Maine was a recent challenge grantee to support an artist residency as part of their River Jam Fringe Festival, which is why we have this image up here on this slide. Moving to our next program, which is Our Town. And this is a program that supports creative placemaking projects. And when we talk about creative placemaking, we often ask, well, what do you mean exactly? How do you define that? And the most simple definition is really about projects that strengthen local communities through arts and culture. And creative placemaking is when arts, culture, and design activities are deliberately integrated into those efforts that ultimately strengthen communities. They can take on many different forms, from an artist residency to a festival, to a cultural planning process. And this is an opportunity that is open currently for grants that range between $25,000 and $150,000. And the guidelines are currently posted. We have a great detailed webinar if this is an opportunity that you're interested in, with the deadline of August 5th. I will emphasize this program requires a partnership between a nonprofit 501c3 organization and a local or tribal government. And one of those key partners must be an arts, culture, or design organization. And I love to flash up this image on the screen because if you live in Portland, Maine, hopefully you've seen these bus shelters designed across the city. And we have funded through the Our Town program 2 phases of this work that support the artist fees and the public art installations at these bus shelters. And this is a project that had a really compelling partnership with the Greater Portland Transit District to encourage the utilization of public transportation, strengthening local community pride, and provide an opportunity for artists and transit professionals to collaborate. All right, now moving on to the Grants for Arts projects. This is our sort of bread and butter category. We have 2 deadlines every year. Applications are submitted to one of our 15 artistic disciplines and include funding for creation, presentation, exhibition, education, and services to the field. We just passed the deadline on July 8th, but we'll be offering a new round of application opportunities in 2022, likely to also occur again in February and July. But you might want to take a look at the grant guidelines just to get a sense for what's required for the application here. And awards range from $10,000 to $100,000, and also just to flag, project timeline can be up to 2 years. We typically are funding projects from 1 to 2 years. Opera Maine received a grant in this category to support their production of The Magic Flute by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and librettist Emanuel Schikaneder and related community activities. We support projects in the Grants for Arts projects category across all these 15 different disciplines. You'll see these across the screen here, and the guidelines for each discipline are posted on our website. And just want to emphasize, we're an incredibly accessible staff. We love hearing from potential applicants, whether you've applied in the past or you're doing it for the very first time. We have all of our staff contact up on our website, so please do not hesitate or be shy about reaching out to us directly. So to apply, you're going to choose which artistic discipline your project best fits into. And again, just reach out. If you're not quite sure, you have an interdisciplinary project and you want some guidance on which discipline you should apply to, give us a call. So just to wrap up this overview of our grant making programs before we dive specifically into the ARP opportunity, I just want to emphasize that our funding supports arts projects. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see the types of organizations that are eligible to apply for funding. And we covered this really briefly, but if you have any questions, again, just feel free to give us a shout. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see the types of things that we're not able to fund. In our Grants for Arts projects category, Our Town and Challenge America, we cannot fund general operating support. The exception to that is this American Rescue Plan opportunity, which my colleague Courtney will speak about in a moment. We are not able to support directly to individual artists, but artists should be a part of your budget. So always think about the artist and designer community that you're supporting through the work that you're doing. I think it's also important to really lift up that we cannot fund fiscal sponsorships. So the applicant organization must be programmatically involved in a project being put forth. So these are just a few things I want to bring to folks' attention as you're starting to conceive of potential projects to apply for. So with that, I'm going to shift over to my colleague Courtney to introduce this opportunity of the American Rescue Plan.
Thank you, Jen. So great to talk to everybody. ARP is something that we are all hands on deck for right now with the agency. Very excited to be able to offer this opportunity, which is pretty close to the same amount of money that we award every year in grants. So it's a big chunk of money and a big opportunity for us. In terms of specifically looking at the Grants for Organizations award opportunity, there are 2 opportunities here. One for local arts agencies that might be subgranting. That's different from what I'm going to mostly be focusing on here, but we can certainly answer questions about that if they come up. But specifically to address the opportunity here for organizations, that includes nonprofit organizations, universities, municipal governments or tribal communities. Those organizations can apply for $50,000, $100,000, or $150,000. As Jen mentioned, we do not have the usual requirement for cost share matching for this. So the amount that you ask for needs to be the whole of your budget. And the grant period can be for up to 2 years, starting no earlier than January 1 of 2022. One question that comes up a lot in these webinars is, how much should I ask for? There's a couple of different ways to think about that. And bottom line is we don't have a standard kind of rubric for what we're recommending for organizations. There's not a requirement of a certain amount. We wanted to give organizations flexibility to respond to what their needs were. And so things to consider would be your organizational capacity as reflected in your organizational budget. You are required to submit an organizational budget for the past 3 years, which reflects, your income and expenses for those 3-year cycles. You also want to consider what is the activity you're asking to support, if that's staff salaries or if that's mortgage expenses or if that's fees for artists to conduct your work. Those numbers might be different depending on what your needs are, and you might ask for a different amount based on what those needs are. You might also want to think about the amount of time you're asking for support. If you're going to ask for 3 months to cover, the next 3 months of salaries or the first 3 months of January for salaries, that's going to look really different than if you're going to look at taking a grant and using it over the course of a 2-year period. And then finally, how do those expenses in the narrative and the request align with your organization's mission? And how do those things respond to what this particular opportunity is focused on? Jen, if you want to go to the next slide, I think we talk about the criteria there. So this opportunity is focused, it's different than our usual grants. It's not focused on particular projects or programs. This is very much focused on general operating support. So that can be salaries, whether that's a part of a salary or a whole salary. It can be for salaries that are new, for salaries that exist, or for maybe positions that were furloughed and that you want to reintroduce. It can also be for fees or stipends for artists or contractual personnel, maybe an accountant or maybe even cleaning services, but services that support specific activities as part of your organizational operations. Facilities costs such as mortgage principal, although not mortgage interest, rent or utilities. That could also include websites and things like that, internet connectivity. And then costs associated with health and safety supplies, things like PPE. And then finally, marketing promotion costs for your organization. And I imagine we'll get some questions around the specifics here, but there's a lot of information on our website that talks a little more about this in the Q&A, in the FAQ section particularly, but we're happy to address further questions if you have them in our session today. Jen, next slide. Review criteria. There are, as with all of our grants, artistic excellence and artistic merit are the two kind of main buckets of thinking of category involved in how we review the grants. In this case, they are focused on the significance. You want to consider the significance to the mission and core work of your organization. We want to understand, and these are criteria that our panelists will be asked to think about. How does your ability to carry out an award shown by the alignment of the budget and the other resources with the goals and requirements of this funding opportunity? In other words, is there evident capacity in your application that you can carry out this grant in the context of supporting your organization? As appropriate, is there potential to have immediate impact on the arts workforce, which in other words is not required, but is a consideration? And then as appropriate, is there potential to serve and or reach individuals whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by ethnicity, economics, geography, or disability? So you'll notice if you're a familiar applicant to us, this is a little tighter and shorter list of requirements or review criteria for us. Again, really focused on operational support here and how we can help organizations continue operating coming out of the pandemic. All right, next slide. In terms of timing, there are, as with all of our grants, it's a 2-part application. Part 1 is due August 12th. Again, this is focused specifically on grants to organizations. August 12th is the deadline for part 1 at midnight, and that's regardless of what your organizational name is. For part 2, because of the number of applications that we're expecting, we've divided it up into 2 groups. So part 2 is groups A through L. If your registered name with the IRS begins with A through L, then you should look for that part 2 window to be open between August 19th and August 25th. And that's the NEA specific part of the application. Part 1 is grants.gov It's a very simple form. There's just a few fields to fill out. Really, the complexity there is just making sure that your sam.gov and those materials are up to date. For part 2, it's the NEA specific applicant portal, group A through L, August 19 to 25. And the second group, groups M through Z, August 27th through September 2nd. Again, that's a week-long window for each of those, divided by alphabet. Once we receive all your applications, we'll begin a panel review process, which will then go to council. You'll hear from us in December about whether you're being recommended for an award. And if you are, then you'll have an opportunity to update your budget and make any changes to your project that you need to. And then your earliest start date is January 1 of 2022. All right, a few frequently asked questions. What is the difference between a project-based grant and a general operating grant? For project-based grants, the costs must relate to specific execution of a project. For operatings, it's more general. So for a project grant, say you're going to do a production of a musical performance, you can include things like utilities, other overhead costs, rent, staff time, but it has to be in an amount that's specific to that particular program or project. For general operating, you have a lot more flexibility. It can be for 3 months, it can be for 2 years, it can be for something in between. But they need to be specific to keeping the doors open and supporting your staff. So hopefully that addresses that a little bit. We can certainly dig into that if people have specific questions there. Can I apply to ARP if I've already applied for another NEA grant or other federal funding such as the SBAG or PPP? Yes, absolutely. ARP is an additional opportunity in addition to our town or grants for arts projects, or if you've already gotten federal funding. The important thing in any of those opportunities is that you don't have overlapping costs between those different budgets. So you can't fund more than 100% of a salary through different grants. It has to be, everything has to kind of line up and either not overlap in dates or not overlap in amounts. Are work samples required for ARP? They are not. This is a departure from our usual requirements for our grants for arts projects in our town and Challenge America. No work samples for this one. Some things to remember. If you have not applied for federal funding before, or if you, for some reason, don't have an active DUNS number or SAM account or grants.gov, do that now. It can take more time than you think. We definitely recommend at least 2 weeks ahead of the deadline. So we still have time, but definitely recommend getting going on that as soon as possible. And submitting your Part 1 application as soon as possible. It's open now, it's available. Please do that as quick as you can. You don't want to wait till the last day. The systems are going to be busy and you just don't know what you might run into. So you want to make sure you're ahead of that August 12th deadline. We don't accept late applications. Unfortunately, we cannot be flexible on this. If you don't have your Part 1 submitted successfully to grants.gov by August 12th, we cannot receive your application. And then Part 2 is due on those 2 different time windows that I talked about. You can prepare in advance and we can talk a little bit about where to find those materials. There's a PDF in the how to apply section on our website for this opportunity where you can download a PDF. It tells you all the questions, how many characters you need for each question. So you can really prepare ahead of time. Definitely recommend doing that and don't wait till the last minute to submit. And then contacts, we'll paste these into the chat as well. But we're really happy to talk to you. We're happy to email, happy to work with folks who have disabilities through our accessibility office and other methods. And we also have some Zoom webinars scheduled. They're actually not webinars, but Q&A opportunities. Just log into Zoom, ask questions. Folks like myself and my colleagues are logged in for those and just, responding to questions as they come in. So we're here really trying to be as accessible as possible and address questions as these come up. So please reach out. And then just a little more about how to apply. For Part 1, you do have to, for the major steps, you have to have a DUNS number, which you have to register for if you haven't done that yet. Once you have your DUNS, you can go to sam.gov and register there. SAM is basically what any federal application requires. It's where the money gets transferred. So that's where your bank information gets kept, and it's where we know that you're an organization interested in applying for federal funding or having federal funds. So you do your sam.gov, and then in grants.gov, you also register there, but you can't complete that grants.gov form until you have a CAGE code from SAM. So it's a little bit of a sequence there, which is why we recommend getting started early, because at any step along the way, it can get hard to, you can run into snags you didn't anticipate. I will say, just from personal experience, SAM and grants.gov are super helpful. They answer the phone. They do the best they can to respond to folks quickly. So phone numbers here, they're also on our website. We just recommend, starting early and being on top of stuff there as you can. We don't have direct access to their systems, so there's not a lot we can do to help you other than just navigating how to get to where you need to go, but we can't resolve technical challenges or problems you're having there. And then for part 2, as I mentioned, that's the NEA specific piece of this that you submit through the applicant portal. Once you submit part 1, you'll get an email with your grants.gov password, excuse me, and username and an NEA specific username, and you'll use those to log in for part 2. There's detailed instructions on our website for this, but that part 2 is a little more detailed. That's where you describe your organizational mission. There's a narrative about your activities or the things you want to pay for with this grant, budget forms for the project or the activities, as well as your organization. And then 3 years of programming history, just highlights there of what you've done over the last 3 years or so. Excuse me, one second.
Courtney, I'm also happy to.
I think I'm
jump
back.
in here.
And I think I'm actually almost done. I think we've got just one more slide.
Yep.
Yep, newsletters. So please do sign up. We have general newsletters as well as specifics for different disciplines. Jen and I are happy to promote our design and creative placemaking newsletter, which comes out about once a month, and has opportunities across the agency as well as what's happening in those fields more broadly. And panelists. And I dropped a link into the chat earlier for this. We really do love to get new folks in for panel review, and it's a great way to learn how our process works. What's the sausage making kind of behind the curtain there? So to mix my metaphors. But yeah, it's a great thing, and we consider it sort of design and arts jury duty. So always happy to have new folks in there to look at what's happening. It's an inspiring process, even though it is also some work. And Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jen and Courtney. We know that this was a lot of information all at once. We'll make sure that the slides are available and all the links we put in the chat. So if you registered, you'll get those after this. And of course, stay in touch with our live Q&A sessions, the links that we shared in the chat, and of course, reach out to us directly. And if you do have questions, we'll just go through the chat and I'll read them aloud really to our experts, Jen and Courtney. Here's a question about what financial documentation is required. Will the grant budgets look like the NEA project budgets as in grants for arts projects? Courtney?
Yeah, it's the same fields as usual. A little different in that you don't have to put anything on the income side except the NEA 50,000 or 100,000 or 150,000. You don't need to show any match, which can feel a little strange to leave that side blank. But the fields are the same as the usual form for the other grant opportunities.
Great, thank you, Courtney. And a helpful tip as you think about making sure you're applying broadly from David, just reading if you haven't seen it in the chat, to be aware that for the SAM and grants.gov info, you also need to assure the organizational name you're using there matches the name according to the articles of incorporation that are on file with the state of Maine. It needs to match exactly. I imagine that can be tricky, so thank you, David. And also a good time, again, to emphasize that we want you to apply at the NEA, we want you to apply at the regional level, we want you to apply at the state level. Check out the guidelines for each, but there's nothing that will inherently stop you from applying. You just can't double up on the same dollar. So that means you could apply for salaries. So we're talking about general operating support, salaries for January from one funding stream, salaries for the next month, February, from another. So apply broadly. We understand that there's tremendous need in the field, and we want to make sure you have the money you need to get on the other side of this pandemic. We're just scrolling down. So a plug for the SAM help desk. Thank you that someone had a real life experience where that worked. That's wonderful to hear. Yes, I got a question about ARP applying with the NEA and the NEH. We are beloved sister agencies, but separate. So always check out if you are eligible for an NEH grant, please reach out to them. I should emphasize, as the Congresswoman said, she is a great champion, not just for our agency, but for the NEH as well. So really just a wonderful steward of the arts and humanities throughout the country. Contact information, we will make sure that, and it already is there, Courtney has it. Thank you, Courtney. A question about, I am part of a museum, but not an arts museum with a pretty significant arts project. I'm curious how much background is needed for my organization and a project to help make the arts connection. Any tips, Courtney or Jen?
I would just say, make sure as you're talking about the mission of your organization, really focus and emphasize the arts and cultural programming piece. That is sort of where you will be most competitive. Being the National Endowment for the Arts, we're really trying to reach and support and sustain arts and cultural programming staff, operating costs, to just ensure that we're really reaching those through the ARP program. So I think it's great. You can share your overall mission, but you'll want to make sure that you make it really apparently clear to the panelists who are going to be reviewing your application about that arts and cultural mission aligned programming that you do, that you're looking for the operating support for.
Great.
And I'll just add to that just briefly. Within the application, you're required to submit 3 years of programmatic activities. And it doesn't need to be comprehensive in any way. You need at least one arts activity over the last, each year for the last 3 years, roughly. We also have some flexibility there, recognizing some organizations weren't able to do their normal programming as they would have during the pandemic. So that's a place where you can also highlight whatever you've been doing over the last, recent years doing with arts activities. But you need at least one arts activity in there to be considered eligible. We're encouraging YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs and organizations like that to consider themselves in this pool and eligible. So there's a lot of different groups. We want to build a big tent with this opportunity particularly. But sometimes those groups don't identify as an arts org. So that's fine. You just, as Jen pointed out, you want to make sure that your mission is reflective and feels relevant for this opportunity, and the costs that you include are arts specific.
Great, thank you so much. A helpful tip from Dana that I'll read aloud if you haven't seen in the chat, that if you are new to this whole process and haven't set up an entity administrator, you'll need to submit a notarized letter from an authorized organization representative as part of the SAMS process. So thank you, Dana. We want to make sure that everyone who's new to apply for federal funding has the information they need to succeed. So really appreciate that tip as well. And we have 6 more minutes according to my clock that I'm sure is wrong on my computer. But I think one thing that I'd like to go over while people maybe think of some last minute questions, and Courtney spoke about it well, is how do we decide, how do you, your organization, decide how much to apply for? The $50,000, $100,000, $150,000. And as an agency, we're only able to fund level for which you apply. And so we know that this is front of mind for you. And what we want to emphasize is that no part of this application process is meant to be a gotcha question. We're not looking to trip you up. If you're thinking in the back of your mind, what if I apply for too much and I look greedy? My need isn't as much as my neighbors. The number is going to be right for you. And we want to work with you to make sure that you're applying for the right amount. So as you think about the guidelines and think about the kinds of things that Jen so eloquently described and how to lift up the arts programming at your organization, think about the number that's right for you. Think about your budget, review our guidelines, and then maybe drop into one of those live Q&A sessions, reach out to someone at the agency, and we'll want to work with you to make sure you're in a position to succeed. Again, no part of this application process is intended to trip you up. it's really, we're setting those different funding levels with an eye towards flexibility. We know there's so much uncertainty, and we want to make sure that this opportunity works for all organizations of all sizes. You may also be thinking $50,000 is too much for my organization. And we would encourage you to think about other funding opportunities. And that's with David, that's at the regional level. Take a look, there'll be other funding opportunities at different levels. And of course, stay in touch with us as an agency beyond the ARP funding opportunity, as we're able to fund at lower levels as low as $10,000 during our regular grants for arts projects.
Yes, that's a great point, Ben. And I think also thinking creatively about the things that you would submit for ARP. Maybe you would submit an ED salary for a 2-year period instead of just 1 year. You know, or maybe it's your mortgage or your rent or, you know, utility costs or something in there that I think, to add on to what Ben was saying around making a compelling case, you want to make sure that, and it's hard, how do you turn rent into a sexy application? It's hard to do. But I think what we're looking for is a connection between what your organization does on a day-to-day basis, the costs, the way you describe what you want to do with this money and how this money would help you advance what you do on a day-to-day basis, and how the line items in the budget respond to those aspirations. What do you want to do? And I think talking about who you're reaching with your work, I think talking about, you know, the nature that you approach your work. I think trying to get a sense of who your organization is in a more personal way, for lack of a better term, is going to be a way to help distinguish yourself in what will very likely be a very large pool of applicants. And I think the only way our panelists and we have a way of understanding why your organization is special is you have to tell us. You have to include that mission information. You have to talk about activities. And it doesn't mean you need to make stuff up, but just trying to be as clear and simple as possible in who you are and how this money is going to make a difference in the way that you do your work in the world, in Maine, is, I think, going to be helpful for us to help understand why this is a project that we should be funding, or that your grant is one we should be funding.
Thank you so
Hey,
much.
Ben, it's Diane. I have
Yes.
one question here that might be, if there are other, as the rookie here, the real
Yes.
rookie here, if there are other tips that previous recipients of grants know for those who may be new to this process, those shared, I think, would be tremendously helpful. The comment that was made earlier was something that was very helpful. Hopefully, we are attracting new applicants and new institutions to the NEA with the ARP grants to help turn all of this around. And folks may be completely new. So if there are helpful lessons learned, that might be very helpful for our new friends to hear about in the 4 minutes that we have left.
Yeah, and then Sarah, that was a real great offer to share with the Congresswoman's office. Sarah put her email address in there, and thank you for that suggestion, Diane. We can all collaborate, tide all boats, whatever it is. We'll lift each other up and make sure we're in a position to succeed when you apply. A question that just came in: if we are a college of art with a gallery attached, what is the best structure to apply for ARP funding to support the gallery? Can we apply for gallery operating expenses and cite the gallery staff and operating costs? So I think, so again, this is an instance of a college with a separate gallery. So how to best define the organization during the application process. And operating costs related to the gallery are not the larger college operating expenses, or do we need to apply using the project-based option to target the gallery only?
I would say you want to focus on the gallery or whatever arts. You don't want to submit a grant for general college operating. You want to make sure it's focused on the arts entity that you want to support. So your budget should reflect gallery budget. Your cost should reflect gallery costs. Your narrative should describe gallery narrative activities, even if your mission statement also talks about the university as a whole. One little thing I'll just throw out there, if the university is applying in addition to, like if it's just for the gallery, that's great. Many universities have the opportunity to come in for a second submission if there's more than one organization that can qualify as what's called an independent component. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. I can put my email here in the chat as well, if you think that's a scenario for your organization.
Great, thank you, Courtney. I see that we're running short on time. Again, always happy to take additional questions. Get in touch with us directly. Also, David, thank you for, could we give a quick, I know Evan and Sarah were running short on time. David, sorry that we haven't gotten to you just yet. Do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, and I think we're in no rush, but if people need to leave, we understand, but we'll
Yes.
be.
Thank you,
Well,
David. Thank you, Sarah.
here's my secret goal in all of this, and that is that the folks at the NEA get so many Maine-based applications that they go, what the hell's going on in Maine? Because Maine has always been a bit of an underachiever with NEA applications, and it's time for us to stop that. And so let's work together and get people applying, because there's great organizations in Maine. Chellee's not kidding when she talks about how great Maine is. So let's get it together and get applications in, and we'll help in any way we can.
Thank you, David. That feels like a great words to close us out on, but I want to turn it over to Evan and Sarah from the Congresswoman's office. And just again, thank you so much for having us today. I think we'd love to be with you in the district, but there's no place we'd rather be virtually than with Congresswoman Pingree and her staff.
Well, thank you, Ben, Jen, Courtney, Diane, David, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. I think you're all probably tired of hearing me say this at this point, but we're here for you if you have questions anytime, whether related to ARP or beyond. I think most of you know at this point that we care a great deal about this. So don't hesitate. But thank you so much for your time this morning, and hope to be in touch with all of you soon. Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I see there are a few others. Any questions remaining, or shall I end this Zoom meeting? Okay, thanks for being here.